Few artists in history painted with as much energy and exaggerated drama as Paul Rubens. His paintings overflow with movement, his colors mesmerize viewers, and the often voluptuous figures he painted practically leap from the surface. But Rubens was more than just a master painter, he was also a master of diplomacy. A man who negotiated between kings, advised princes, and was knighted by two rival monarchs, Philip IV of Spain and Charles I of England. In this video, you'll learn all about Rubens, the artist, the diplomat, and the myth-maker, and how all three identities of this incredibly talented individual came together in one extraordinary project, the Marie de Medici cycle. But to understand how this painter became Europe's favorite ambassador, we have to go back to 1577. That's the year when Rubens was born, in the city of Siegen, in what is now Germany. His family had fled Antwerp during a time of religious turmoil. His father was a Protestant lawyer, and exile during the Counter-Reformation was a matter of survival. After his father's death, Rubens' mother returned with her children to Antwerp and reconverted to Catholicism. The Catholic faith would remain central to Rubens for the rest of his life, personally, politically, and artistically. Young Rubens was given a humanist education. He could read Latin, quote Cicero, and draw mythological scenes from memory. At 14, he began apprenticing with painters, including the refined Otto van Veen, who introduced him to Renaissance ideals. But Rubens' real education began in 1600, when he left on a nearly decade-long trip to Italy. There, he encountered the drama and chiaroscuro of Caravaggio, the harmonious balance of Raphael, and the sensuality of Titian. He studied the ruins of Rome, the sculpture of antiquity, and soaked in the grandeur of classical art. With this in mind, it shouldn't surprise you that an ancient sculpture known as Laocoon and his Sons inspired him tremendously. Italy shaped Rubens profoundly, but he didn't merely copy masters such as Leonardo da Vinci or Michelangelo, he simply learned from them and gradually developed his own style. He became a court painter to the Duke of Mantua, frequently traveled across the peninsula, and was even sent to Spain as a diplomatic envoy. Already, while he was still in his 20s, his brush was accompanied by letters of negotiation. While working for the Duke of Mantua, he mainly painted family portraits. This experience shaped his portrait painting technique. He would have probably stayed in Italy forever, but after about 8 years, his mother became seriously ill. By the time he returned to Antwerp in 1608 to visit his mother, who had already passed away upon his arrival, Rubens was no longer just a student, but both a master painter and diplomat. To take his mind off this tragic loss, he married a woman named Isabella Brandt, the daughter of a wealthy family in Antwerp. He also established a massive workshop that produced paintings for courts, churches, and collectors across Europe. His mansion, now a museum known as the Rubenshuis, was designed by Rubens himself. He clearly got his inspiration from the Italian palaces he visited so frequently before. At one point, his studio employed over 20 assistants, including the equally gifted Flemish painter Anthony van Dyck. Van Dyck went on to become the court painter of England and was also knighted by the English King Charles I. Regardless of the fact that he had a lot of help to fulfill the copious amount of orders he received, every painting that left his studio bore the unmistakable signature style of Rubens. But Rubens wasn't satisfied to be merely an artist in a region that was plagued by war. In fact, he lived throughout the 80 Years' War in the Habsburg Netherlands and only saw 12 years of peace in his lifetime between 1609 and 1621. When the war resumed, two other tragedies occurred from Rubens and his contemporaries' other enemy, the plague. His daughter Clara Serena died in 1623, aged 12, followed by his wife Isabella in 1626, aged 34. Life was rough, and it shows in some of his self-portraits from the final chapter of his life. Despite the harsh conditions, he cultivated friendships with princes and scholars, wrote essays, and exchanged letters with ambassadors in multiple languages. When yet another war loomed between Spain and England in the 1620s, it was Rubens who quietly traveled between courts. With paintings in one hand and peace proposals in the other, he became the ultimate cultural diplomat. I tend to think that his social skills were second to none and that he was quite enjoyable to hang out with. And then, when he was already one of Europe's leading painters, Rubens received his greatest artistic challenge, the Marie de Medici cycle. In 1621, Marie de Medici, Queen of France and widow of King Henry IV, commissioned Rubens to decorate the Grand Hall in her new Luxembourg Palace in Paris. The subject? Various episodes from her own life. This was a calculated choice because Marie, who was actually Italian, was highly unpopular at court and with the French public. But Rubens knew how to paint a story, but as you'll see, it was, unfortunately, to no avail for the Queen. He had 2 years to complete the commission, which was signed in 1622. That's because her daughter, Henrietta Maria, was set to marry the future King Charles I in 1624. Rubens completed the task, and the result was a cycle of 24 monumental paintings, now displayed together at the Louvre. They show Marie's life not in chronological realism, but as a grand allegory. Her birth is watched over by the fates, her marriage to Henry IV is blessed by the Olympian gods. Political crises are softened by heavenly interventions, and her exile is painted as a sacred trial. And in the masterpiece titled The Apotheosis of Henry IV and the Proclamation of the Regency of Marie de Medici, her husband ascends to heaven as she calmly assumes power on earth. The message was clear. Marie's rule was no accident, it was destiny. He did whatever he could to capture her pride, her sorrow, and her resilience. And by doing so, he didn't just flatter a queen, he tried to reshape how history remembered her. As you surely guessed by now, this was in fact a massive 17th century propaganda cycle of 24 monumental paintings. The Marie de Medici cycle was installed in 1625, but Marie wanted more. The cycle of paintings glorifying her didn't have the desired effect on the French population. Therefore, she commissioned Rubens to paint another 24 paintings, similarly grandiose, but commemorating her deceased husband, King Henry IV. These were meant to hang in separate wings that came together in an opulent arcade that unified the 48 paintings. But the second cycle was never completed, and there were at least 2 reasons for it. First of all, Paul Rubens, who was somewhat of a pacifist, was extremely busy trying to negotiate peace between Spain and England. His efforts, however, earned him the title of knighthood in both Spain and England, in 1624 and 1630 respectively. Secondly, the French court postponed the release of funds for this project several times, and Marie de Medici's political influence gradually vanished. Perhaps starting with the cycle commemorating her deceased husband was a better idea, don't you think? She was eventually banished from France in 1631 and spent the rest of her life in exile. And here's a fascinating anecdote. She spent the final period of her life in Cologne, living in the house that Paul Rubens lived in as a child. Not just that, it's also in this house that she passed away, which I find a fascinating plot twist, to say the least. Over the course of his life, Rubens painted hundreds of paintings, ranging from religious altarpieces, mythological epics, to royal portraits. He married twice, raised a large family, and found time to write essays and design architecture. Rubens spent the final decade of his life together with his second wife, Helena Fourment, who was the 16-year-old niece of his first wife, Isabella. In 1635, the 58-year-old bought himself a castle to retire in. It's known as Het Steen and is located just south of Antwerp. He didn't manage to enjoy it for too long because 5 years later, in 1640, he passed away due to heart failure caused by chronic gout. His Baroque style is easily recognizable, and in the Marie de Medici cycle, he managed to transform propaganda into visual poetry. Many people abruptly develop the Stendhal syndrome when they step into the Sistine Chapel and see Michelangelo's world-famous frescoes. When you visit the Louvre, you simply have to check out the magnificent Rubens room, as in my opinion, you can also catch a bad case of the overwhelmed by art syndrome when you step into it.